They've won Tonys and Oscars and Emmys and Grammys. There's no red carpet because they're home in their jammies. From Melrose Place to Broadway to Janeway and her crew. Let Seth and James bring all the stars to you.
Anywho.
They're entertaining everyone, so who's gonna grouse? Just sit right back and you'll hear some tales on Stars in the House.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Stars in the House.
Everyone, we're back upstate. We are a fundraiser, as most of you must know by now, for the Actors Fund, which is for everybody in the arts, whether you be on stage, behind the scenes, under the stage, like a musician, in front of the camera, behind the camera. No matter what you do, you can get help from the Actors Fund. If you need help, get thee to actorsfund.org. They can help pay your rent if you need it. They can help pay your medical bills, buy you groceries, actorsfund.org. James, if people want to donate to the Actors Fund, and boy, we're really close to having a lot of money soon.
Yeah, you know what? I just realized I didn't get the update from Maggie. I know that it was over $1,090,000, but I don't know what the exact update is. I just realized that before we went on. But you can, yes, Seth, you can go to starsinthehouse.com, or you can text Fund 2020 to 56512. And if you are able to donate live tonight, you can forward that receipt to donations@starsinthehouse.com. Seth, what is tonight's show before we, just so people know right here at the top?
We're celebrating in general this amazing new podcast called Burnt that our friend Blake Ross created and hosts. And we're celebrating a specific episode of Burnt, which is about this musical called Rebecca, based on the novel by Daphne du Maurier, which was a huge hit in Europe, and then it was slated for Broadway, and holy cow, did things go wrong. And Blake has all the inside scoop, including the actual players that were involved, not the scandalous people, but the people that were kind of victims of the scandal.
There you go.
They're all going to be here chatting about it.
Yeah, so, but before we bring on Blake and our first guest, we want to just go over, we just got back. What's that, Seth?
I'm going to tweet about it.
You're going to tweet about it. Okay, so I'm going to take over here. So we went to Los Angeles on Wednesday for Willie Garson's memorial, which was on Saturday. In fact, here we are at rehearsal. It was at the Skirball Center on Saturday. Seth and I put together this number that was, and you can see from left to right, Jason Alexander, Steven Weber, Nia Vardalos, and Matt Bomer, who himself had just flown in for, he's filming a TV show for Netflix in South Carolina, had just flown in, and there's Seth at the keyboard. And we will have a clip of it next week. But it was a lot of fun, and most importantly, it was what Willie wanted, as far as it was an irreverent, I would say it was funny, touching, moving, an irreverent tribute to him. I think there were like 500 people there, and that was one of the numbers. It was a big gospel choir. That was his request, and
the stories were amazing about him. You really got a sense of who he was. A lovable curmudgeon.
Yes.
And his wish was for money to go to this charity that we introduced him to.
You got to believe.
That's the name of the organization.
Yes.
He's not just saying it.
The only organization in New York that is dedicated solely to helping older kids, and by kids I mean like 18, 19, 21, at my age, 24 years old, finding forever families. And the Discovery Communications donated $300,000 to start the Willie Garson Fund. And the last time I checked, which was yesterday afternoon, it was up to $430,000. Every penny of it going to, you got to believe. The whole event was actually underwritten by HBO, because as you probably know, Willie Garson, along with Sarah Jessica Parker and others from Sex and the City, I guess, not sequel, but the revival of it, I guess. And it's, what is it called? You called it something else, and I'm putting you on the spot. And so he goes, I have a feeling Blake Ross knows. So I'm going to ask Blake.
By the way,
look it up.
We've been begging people whether we look fuzzy, and every single person said we don't. And finally, there's honesty. We have MAME lighting. Remember, I said, do we look fuzzy? And Blake's like, absolutely not. No, we literally have the Luciball filter.
Well, see, we don't have David Katz here, so we always are like, we don't have David. So, but when this airs on SiriusXM, the listeners won't know, so it'll just be people
just know that we look super young.
Yeah, yes. But anyway, so we'll have more next week. Oh, we did meet one of our in person, Josh Malina, who has been on Stars in the House several times for both our West Wing and Scandal reunions. So we got to meet him and his lovely wife, Melissa. afterward. And this was actually it's Nia Vardalos taking a selfie.
Yeah, it's the making of a selfie.
Yes, with the rehearsal, along with the two who put the whole thing together. Up in the top left, Mark Levin and his wife, who's also their producing team, Jennifer Flackett, and doing the rehearsal there. And most importantly, you and your dad when you went to Palm Desert.
Correct, Mundo. I don't know why he looks so short.
Well, I can only hope you look that good at 90. If you look that good at 90, boy, did I score. Blake Ross is nodding. Am I right, Blake? It's like, come on. Got it going on at 90.
Sadly, he's 56. No, just kidding.
All right, Seth, let's bring on Blake to explain, because we have our first special guest is Sierra Boggess, and she has got a time crunch, and we want to bring on Blake to get it going, and then we're going to bring on Sierra Boggess.
So here we go. The hostess of Burnt.
Yes.
You got to meet her, Ms. Blake Ross.
Hi, Blake.
Hi, in my bedroom. Hi, guys.
Hi,
Blake.
I'm usually behind the screen just yelling at you guys, like reminding you, like, hello, don't forget, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm here live and I could do it myself.
Oh, but Blake, by the way, what did I forget?
Yes. So we forgot to mention that there is, besides You Gotta Believe, which is amazing, and the Actors Fund, which is amazing. If you have extra funds, please check out both of those organizations. Of course, you know the Actors Fund, but check out You Gotta Believe too, because they're amazing. But there's another benefit concert coming up next Monday for the ACLU. It's called Sing Out for Freedom. It is an amazing concert. It's hosted by the awesome, amazing friend of the show, Peppermint.
That's
Miss
right.
Pep is going to be hosting this awesome concerts with Laura Benanti and Nikki M. James, Brandon Michael Nace, who's the founder of Broadway for Racial Justice. There's a bunch of really good performances. And you can go out to, I think it's singoutforfreedom.com. You can get tickets for the taping, or in the comfort of your own home, much like we do here at Stars in the House, you also can stream it.
Yeah.
So you can see it either live or you can stream it.
Yes. Yes,
Yeah.
It's at Town Hall in New York City.
Great.
If you can go live, but if you're not in New York, they're also streaming it.
They're streaming. NYCOU. Donna Lieberman is the head of that. So yeah, watch that. That's next Monday. So Blake, should we bring on the first guest because she's on her time crunch? She already has her hair.
Yes,
moved
let's
to
bring
one
out.
side.
Let's see her.
1, 2, 3. Sierra's hair.
Sweet.
Oh my! And the babs wall and everything. I love it.
Always.
Yes, ma'am.
Hi, guys.
Blake, you lead everything because this is your amazing podcast, which I devoured.
He sure did.
Okay, so we'll just start at the very beginning. A very good place to start, as we all know. Rebecca the musical was to be a musical rendition of the Daphne du Maurier novel, as you mentioned, and the Alfred Hitchcock film from the 40s about a young woman who is nameless, but in the German musical, she was I or Ich, depending on your pronunciation, who falls in love with this beautiful, gorgeous, grand, rich man named Maxim de Winters. He whisks her off to his abode, beautiful estate called Mandalay, and the whole thing goes to and ends up in flames. Now, Miss Boggess down there was to play Ich, nameless person, the star of the show.
If you
In
will.
London. Sierra, tell us how it came to be. Just tell us, like, why you were give us the setting, because you had come off of The Little Mermaid. You were about to go into Love Never Dies, or
So I got involved because Francesca Zambello directed Little Mermaid, and then I had moved to London and I was about to do Love Never Dies, and so she asked me, would I come and do this reading of Rebecca in London? And so I was like, sure, of course, like, all right. And so at that point she was directing it, and that's how I got involved. And from then on, it was just, from the moment that we rehearsed that reading, it seemed crazy. It seemed like something was wrong.
it was a little it's a little bit like a cursed musical, and we'll go through, you know, the many iterations of it. But the London part, which what you were a part of, and then the beginning of Broadway before it never got here. But I should mention the producer of the show is a man named Ben Sprecher, a woman named Louise Verlenza. Get accustomed to those names because we will be throwing them out as we go along this journey. But they were the two producers that were supposed to be bringing this to Broadway. And
so let me just say one thing. This wasn't an original show in the sense that it was the first time. This was already a hit, right? In Germany.
Germany.
So
it had been running in Germany. It had started running other places in Europe. Wow. There were other multi-language versions of this. So there was quite, you know, some buzz going on about it. Right, Sierra?
I don't remember there being other at the time that we did the reading. I remember there was the German version, but if there was other ones, I didn't know. But they fired people halfway through the reading, which was so bizarre because it wasn't anybody's fault. Like nobody was doing anything that was a fireable thing. And they then brought in cast members from Germany.
Oh.
Wow.
Yeah. So is she frozen for you guys?
She's
too?
frozen with her drama.
Okay. I know the drama is frozen, but basically, so the show had been running in Germany for a while. It was a big hit, and they had this reading that Sierra was doing in London. And as she mentions, this in the middle, some people got fired, and then they flew in people from the production in Germany to replace, which is not usual, correct, Sierra?
Not during a reading.
Not during a reading, and also nobody did anything that they should have been fired for. Like, not at all. And everybody was incredible. Like, truly, there was not. So it was very bizarre to me. And I'm at that point still just like starting out my career. So I didn't understand like all the stuff going on. I didn't understand all the behind the scenes or anything, but it felt really tricky, and it felt like not a safe place to be.
Wow.
At all.
Which is, you know, something you don't want to hear from your lead actress. But some interesting tidbits about it was, so they were hyping this up as the next Phantom of the Opera. It was all over their pitch documents. It was all over leaked to the press that this was going to be the brand new Phantom of the Opera because the gothic nature of it all, but also there's this grand spectacle at the end of the musical where the whole staircase burns to the ground. But Sierra told me something interesting about the reading in London, because of course, Miss Sierra Boggess, there's that connection with the great Andrew Lloyd Webber. And Sierra?
He came to the reading as one of my guests. And I mean, I could tell just from him at intermission that it was like, like it was not going to, that he was not enjoying, you know, himself. And it was, I don't know why they would even, it's because I do feel like from the start they were thinking of it like this, that it was going to be this next huge thing. But
can I ask you a question? So all over the offering documents for this show was the story that Andrew Lloyd Webber wanted to do Rebecca and that he didn't win the rights to it. Had you ever heard that from him? Like, was he like, I really wanted to do this show myself?
I never heard that.
Okay.
I don't know if that's true, but I never heard that.
But Sierra, what I was going to ask, though, is along those lines, when he walked in the room, had he heard people saying, oh, this is the next Phantom, or do you know?
I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know what he knew.
Right. He was basing it on that, on the experience that he just had watching the first act, is what you're saying.
Yeah, just like I remember him saying to me, he didn't like that I was playing, like my character is supposed to be kind of like dowdy too, you know, the opposite of Rebecca, the dead Rebecca. So I'm supposed to be like really like meek and that whole thing. And I remember him just like, he didn't enjoy that his leading lady, he's like, my leading lady. It was like that.
Okay.
By the way, Sierra, this is hilarious. I hope Sierra didn't have problems getting out of her contract. The contract got out of Sierra. It's like, it never happened.
So basically, Sierra was to led this reading in London. The reading went as the reading went, and they were going to move forward with the production at the Shaftesbury Theatre in London. Then, again, this sort of curse that was sort of surrounding this musical, not to be too dramatic, but we are on Stars in the House. They were excavating some of the theater, the basement of the theater, to try and make room for this massive set that was burning it to the ground. And when they dug into the foundation, a pipe exploded and it flooded a part of the Shaftesbury Theatre. Not to mention, they also found some ancient ruins underneath the theater.
Poltergeist?
Well, that's some phantom shit.
Yeah. So they were like, let's not do it in London, because if you find ruins underneath it, I mean, there's a show playing there now, but they've been doing some construction at the Shaftesbury Theatre. But allegedly, there were some ruins down there and this flood happened. And so they nixed this London idea and decided to take it directly to Broadway. And Sierra was supposed to do it on Broadway as well.
So, Sierra, when did you find out, ooh, by the way, it's not happening? Were you like about to enter stage left? Like, where were you?
So when this was, first of all, for me, this show was always, and I would say with my agents, like, this is the show I will do, because I couldn't get rid of it. Like the person who asked, like, I hope she got out her, I was always like hoping something else came along, because I didn't think the show was, they're thinking of it like this huge spectacle, but there were so many things wrong with it. Lyrically, there was so much stuff that's like, because it's a beautiful story, but it didn't translate well. There was a lot of things wrong with it. So it was always the show that I was like, I'll do this if nothing else comes along for me. So when I found out, so it had already had all this trouble, plus I didn't love any of that firing stuff from day one. Right. Then they were going to fire Francesca, and that's when they brought in Michael to then co-direct. It was just like this whole thing, and there was no integrity. It felt like just no integrity anywhere. So I was supposed to do this with Tam Mutu, who was my then fiance. So he is from London. So he hadn't made his Broadway debut yet. So I'm with him in London, helping him pack up his apartment to move to New York and play Maxim, play opposite me in this thing, which also wasn't right casting, because Tam and I are about 4 years apart, and Maxim is supposed to be much older than she is. Part of the whole thing. Like, they just were capitalizing on the fact that's like, we were real life engaged, And so I get the call from my agent while I'm helping him pack his stuff to move to New York. And this was 2 days maybe before we were supposed to start rehearsal, that the show isn't happening. And the marquee was up, we were moving, and who I felt awful for was him, because for me, I was like, I'm out.
Yeah, you were relieved. There had to have been some relief.
But for him, it was awful, because that was going to be his debut. He was finally going to get to move to New York and have this show and everything. So that's when I found out.
So you found out before Tam. So he's like, hey, honey, who's on the phone? You were like, hey, I'm dead. Nobody. Like,
it was so dramatic. I remember like sitting on the bed, like, I'm going to have to break this news. Nobody knew yet. This was just, they were telling me. And I was like, oh, this is so, so bad. And so that was how I found out. But that day I emailed Hal Prince, because I was supposed,
that's one done.
I was supposed to have done, I was in all the early workshops of Prince of Broadway. I mean, early. So the version that ended up being wasn't even close to the one that we had been working on. And how I had not been able to do the show because of Rebecca. So I emailed Hal that night and I said, I just found this out. Is there any chance, And he said, welcome aboard, honey.
Aww.
And so I was back on, and then that's a whole other thing, because then those producers ended up being sketchy, the original ones. So that one went away. It's like all these curses. But
hold on. two things. So first of all, you went from losing a job to call waiting, getting a job within a minute. Okay, so bravo. B, I'm not going to say that you're a horrible jinx with terrible luck, but can you tell the exact same story that happened in Paris, please?
Yes, and then
And then she's got to go.
So then who closes Phantom? Me. Going to Paris to do Phantom in Paris, and then the theater caught on fire. So I close shows before they even go into rehearsal.
Well,
anyone can close the show once it's running. I close them before they even go in rehearsal.
Blake, anything else for Sierra before she has to go, dear?
No, I mean, I was just going to say, look, I think a couple of things struck me from speaking to Sierra for this podcast, because Sierra was there for the first half of it and then she got out. And I think something that really struck me was, one, your gut and trusting your gut in some of these things. And especially when you're a young actress and you're trying so desperately to get booked in a role, and you get this big musical that's supposed to be the next Phantom of the Opera, but your gut kind of told you that it was a little off. And Francesca told me a little bit about that too, that she just had a gut feeling that something was wrong. So trusting your gut, I really appreciate that. And it's always good to look at hindsight in some of this. And then the next is, also, I mean, it's become theater lore a bit, this musical, the fact that it was cursed and so much horrible stuff. We haven't even skimmed what has really happened with the story. But at the end of the day, there were 130 people, at least, employed by this show that were reliant on it for their money, that were reliant on it for health insurance, for their careers, for lots of things. And I called the podcast Burnt because everybody who went near this musical got burnt.
Right.
And so I do want to just, right now with hindsight and many years in between it, we can joke about it. But at the end of the day, it was a big mess for a lot of people.
Yeah. And that's for sure where I leave things with this in my feeling of it is it's like, it's one thing for this producer to, it speaks to integrity as the word that I always come back to. That's the feeling that I had of this is what's missing on so many levels, just of how people were being treated when there was a show. But then the fact that all of this dishonesty was happening for what? And not ever remembering that there's humans involved. There are humans that left other shows in order to, the man I was going to play opposite is leaving his home. Like all of these things, it's like, there was just it's careless to me, and it's thoughtless. Sure. It's so thoughtless, and it's devastating. And it's devastating, as a company. And there are people other guests that are going to come on. That's like, we ended up having a company dinner. Those of us that were going to be in the Broadway company, we ended up having a company dinner just to say sorry to each other, and just meet some of people making their debuts, all that kind of stuff. It's as usual, the actors figured it out of just how to find some way to do something good in this situation. And we didn't even know all of the stuff yet. We didn't know about the made up. I won't say anything because I'll let you. It
gets crazy.
Yeah. But yes, there just lack of integrity and trusting your instincts and your gut about something is so deeply important. It's so deeply important.
Yeah.
All right. Thank you,
All
Sierra.
right, Sierra love. See you next time. Thanks for bringing us down.
Thanks, Sierra.
Always a
Love
pleasure,
you.
never a chore.
Bye.
And that was the last episode of Stars in the House. It's been burnt.
Exactly.
Just kidding.
So Blake, you wanna introduce the next guest?
So yes, we're gonna have Philip Boroff come on in 1 minute, but I just want to kind of set the stage for everybody. So this musical was happening in London. The theater flooded, ancient ruins. Didn't happen. They were bringing it to Broadway. They delayed it once. This was this whole TAM not coming to Broadway, whatever.
Right.
This was around January 2012.
Okay.
They delayed it because of the economic crisis and they just didn't have enough money, which happens sometimes.
Right.
This is when a very important person enters the fold. This is where it goes from just a regular weird story to a true crime craziness abound. So let's bring on Philip Boroff, my pal.
Okay.
Hi,
from Broadway
Philip.
Hi.
Journal
Thanks
and
for having
Bloomberg.
me.
Sure.
Big fan of the show.
Thank you, Philip.
And by the way, on a side note, someone just said, is Burnt only about this? No, the first 2 episodes are just about this, and then Blake keeps finding theater scandals to talk about.
The first couple of episodes are about it, but
Oh,
then
more
I
than 2?
talk about more scandals. But yes, the first couple ones are about it.
Oh, I listened to them all in a row. It felt like 2. All right, go on.
You know, my voice is just so soothing. So Philip runs a site called Broadway Journal. And for anybody out there who is at all interested in the business of Broadway, the money's financial side of Broadway, breaking news, or anything that's really related to the news, the nitty gritty of Broadway, I suggest you subscribe to it now, because Philip is an ex-Bloomberg reporter and knows the ins and outs of this and goes to courthouses and finds all of these crazy stories. So subscribe to Broadway Journal if you don't already, if you really want to know the insider baseball stuff of what's going on with Broadway.
Thank you very much, Blake.
You're welcome. Plug it away. But I brought Philip on because he was sort of my consigliere throughout a lot of this, because he covered it for so extensively for Bloomberg and Broadway Journal. But into the fray of this, then comes this man named Mark Cotton. And that's really what the podcast is about. There he is. So Mark Cotton is a serial con man grifter, right? So look at these 2 biddies over there.
I know.
Because I literally show a picture and he's pointing to
I
it.
said, don't
but
show
saying
that
don't.
one. I said, don't show that one.
Well,
I
I think we set the stage that he's like not a great character in this.
okay, there you go.
In this story. So Philip, take us a little through, give us a primer on who Mark Cotton is.
Well, I mean, if Mark Cotton is watching, no offense to Mark Cotton, but he really was a stockbroker from hell. I noticed that today, you know, I've been following this for 9 years or so, writing little stories with each development. But just today I was going over, there's something called FINRA, which is the main regulatory body for Wall Street. And they have something called broker check, which has been online for more than 20 years. And it has, when a stockbroker gets into trouble, there would be a citation. And in his career, in the years before he came into this story, he had paid civil fines or caused settlements of almost $10 million, which is, crazy.
On a day's work.
If you're looking for a stockbroker, you're looking for someone who has is totally unblemished. So, there's another question as to why he was even still in the industry in 2012,
right,
when he came onto the scene.
But he also, a year prior to this, filed for a huge personal bankruptcy.
Right.
So if you Googled his name, not only, or you checked FINRA, or you checked broker check, or you checked anything, this guy had a paper trail that was quite long of his dirty doings.
And he came into play Rebecca?
So he came into play the lead of Rebecca.
Okay, because he's a baritone. No, what the hell was his role? I don't remember.
They postponed the show. Louise Forlenza and Ben Sprecher, the main producers, they didn't have enough money to put the show on, and they postponed the show. And at that same time, they met Mark Cotton, and just a few weeks later, he signed a contract to be a consultant for the show. And what that meant was he was essentially fundraising for them. Right. I know you're not supposed to be doing that. And there's lots of different rules that you could skim around, but he was fundraising for them. He was out there looking for people. And within weeks of meeting them and signing this contract, he brings to Ben Sprecher and Louise Forlenza $4.5 million.
Right. And what's fascinating there's so many interesting things about it, but one is that he today, I was looking over at some of the subscription documents for these investors that he found. Yeah. And one was from Australia, another one was from London, and he manages to have like a little spelling mistake, like 3 spelling mistakes in each address, which it's just kind of amazing. Like if you're going to do that, it almost, it almost made me wonder, like, was he doing that he figured that the producers of the show are eventually going to be found out that they were working with this fraudster, and just to kind of make it even worse for them. You know what I mean? It just made no sense. Like if you were, I guess he was like I felt he was a brilliant fraudster, but with bad spelling. But he had been.
But he also used like AOL addresses and business contracts and things like that. That anybody getting it, you wouldn't be getting $4.5 million from somebody like nobody at AOL.com with spelling errors all over their, like, didn't even know how to spell their own address. So it smelled bad. But again, somebody walks into your business and says, I'm going to give you $4.5 million. Here's the contracts for it, weeks after meeting them.
Right.
And, the way that Broadway financing works is you don't get the money directly, you don't just get it directly into your account. You have until the first public performance to raise funds. So they could promise them this money with these subscription agreements, but it obviously never reached the bank. But they were hoping for it. They were banking on it, literally banking on that money coming through. And so
there was a whole, well, you tell the story better than I do, Blake, but
I was just going to say, and you'll have to listen to the podcast to really go the ins and outs of how Houghton kind of like sends Louise and Ben for a real loop down this rabbit hole of cons. And also the podcast also goes into a lot other things that Mark Houghton did. I mean, he scammed lots of people from lots of places out of millions and millions of dollars. So it wasn't just these guys. This was like small potatoes compared to what he was stealing from other people.
But hold on, Blake. Mark was saying, I've raised you the money, or when you say he brought them, or they actually had the money, or he was just claiming he had the money.
He said, here's contracts for $4.5 million.
With no
So they were like, great, that's 30% of our financing that we don't need to get elsewhere.
Right.
And so
he created four fictional investors.
Because he was getting commission essentially on all of these investors that he brought in.
Okay, so he's like, I brought 4 point whatever million. Give me the money for all the money I've raised. P.S. I won't actually show you the cash until the show begins. Don't worry, I'm good for the money.
Yes.
Yeah, he's made it. Okay.
And then there was this crazy dance where, he said, well, I'm having a little problems. Oh, this guy went on safari. I have to find this guy. And then the ringleader ended up contracting malaria, according to this broker, and it just became this horrible, tragic soap opera for the two producers.
The person with the most money wound up contracting malaria, so the
ringleader, essentially
he couldn't give the money to the show. That was the excuse for why the $4.5 million wouldn't make it to the show after months of saying, oh, it's coming, it's here, it's there, it's everywhere. I have to go to Africa to go get it from him. Like all these crazy runarounds. And essentially that's how he killed off this character. He killed him off by saying he died of malaria. And that's where I think, Phil, tell me if I'm wrong, but that's where I kind of started. This went from just some dramatics that happens with Broadway financing, which happens all the time, to that's so weird. Because they literally, the show puts out a press release that then postpones the show again, saying an investor, nameless, has died and we're going to postpone the show. And that got everybody sort of being like, what in the world? That's so odd. And that's sorry.
I think what happened was at that point, we have to give credit to where credit is due. And there, Patrick Healy, who was the theater reporter at the Times, was, quite spectacular. I think the Times felt, I never discussed this with Pat Healy or Scott Heller, his editor at the time, but I think they felt like we're the newspaper of record. We're putting this stuff out. And they were, and Mark Thibodeau, who was the press agent on the show, had said that he was hearing from Pat Healy, this story doesn't make sense. And Pat Healy was hearing from other Broadway producers, this doesn't pass a smell test. So I think as the paper of record, Healy was thinking, I have to investigate if this isn't right, what is going on here? And then he somehow did this internet sleuthing to find that this fellow, even though the the show had not disclosed which investor died, he found out that it was this man, Paul Abrams, who died. And then he could not find any record of Paul Abrams either being alive or ever dying. And that led, well, I'm sorry.
I just want to ask for 1 second. It was Ben Sprecher saying this investor died of malaria, or was Mark Houghton saying the person died of malaria?
So Mark Houghton said he died of malaria. Ben Sprecher took him at his word and built a press release around it and went out. But sorry, Phil, go.
Well, I mean, there was, it's hard to keep track of all these characters, but as I recall, it wasn't just Mark Houghton saying he died of malaria. There was a big paper trail allegedly showing that, as I recall. There were emails. There was a fictional intermediary named Wexler who was talking about all of this happening, that Paul Abrams dying. So it was like a whole drama was created and a paper trail to back it up.
So, but we don't know if Ben was sort of, if Ben believed Mark, we don't really know what his role was per se, the original producer.
Well,
I think at this point there were a lot of questions when it was happening about whether Ben Sprecher was in cahoots.
Right.
I think at this point, there's absolutely zero evidence that he was, and there's no reason he would have been, because this all went so badly for him. I can't imagine. I mean, I'm not saying that I don't know what went on, everything that went on with the finances of the show, and Blake looked at that and raised questions about issues in the financing. But as far as this fraud went on, it certainly seemed to me that Ben Sprecher was a victim of that.
Well, speaking of malaria, we have a doctor break that we have to take. So we will be back. Let's first bring on Dr. LaPook.
All right. Well, Blake, is there anything else before Philip goes and we bring on Dr. LaPook? Because I know we've got 3 guests after the medical break.
We have some cast members.
Well, I keep Philip on. Don't kick him off yet, because I want him to talk a little bit. There's a whole other side of this, another mark that comes into this. And we're not going to tell you the whole story, because you have to listen to the podcast. It's way too long and convoluted to even begin to scratch here at Stars in the House.
Right.
But there's another character that comes in. But let's bring in LaPook just to hear that we're all going to have great Thanksgivings.
All right, Blake. So take a break, and Philip, stand by. Please welcome Seth. Are you ready?
Yeah, I just had to send it to Jason.
Please welcome to Stars in the House, Dr. Jon LaPook.
Malaria. Thank you. You're all going to have great Thanksgivings.
There you go, Blake. See, there you go.
That's all.
What's going to help? Because I know, Dr. LaPook, you're going to be on next Monday for our House Calls show where we're having a matching donation in honor of all the work that you've done. But what can people do? Like we're starting to tell people that we're gonna see on Thanksgiving, if you qualify for the booster, this is the time to get the booster.
Yeah.
And you can get tests and get the test, buy the test, the rapid antigen test. What am I missing, or expand upon that?
You are missing nothing, because I'm so proud of the Stars in the House community. Really, everybody's been so educated. I'm seeing it online, offline. Today, you might have seen the New York City Commissioner of Health basically declared New York City, if you live in New York City, by my reading, that's considered an area where you're at increased risk of contracting COVID by just living in New York City. Wow. So basically, if you're 18 and over and there's no reason not to get it,
I see.
So they're saying, talk to your doctor, your clinician about it. Doesn't have to be a doctor, who your clinician is. But, we've been saying for months now that the data shows that certainly by 6 months, your waning, your immunity has been waning. You may still be protected at 6 months from serious hospitalization, death, although that's waning too. But certainly you don't want to get COVID. You don't want to pass it on to somebody else. You don't want to get it and potentially get long COVID. So
right.
I think if there's, if you are at all eligible for the vaccine, get it. For the booster, get it. And did you see in the last week, I think it was about last week, the data came out for people who got Pfizer. Every time I say that, it's like Marsha.
Hold on, I'm going to go over Pfizer here.
Okay. And the neutralizing antibodies went from something like 450 to 25,000.
After
Wow.
booster?
Went up after the booster, and we expect to have a similar thing for Moderna. People have asked me if you have Moderna, should you get Moderna? If you have Pfizer, if you get Pfizer. There's no evidence that I can tell. It's a little hard to interpret because the booster dose is half of what the original Moderna dose was. But it doesn't seem to me that there is any compelling reason to switch if you have from one mRNA vaccine to another, and no reason not to. In terms of that, it would be bad if you couldn't get it. But
well, you know what, we were in Los Angeles this past weekend, and we were at Memorial for Willie Garson, and vaccination was required, and it was outdoors. But talking to people, I was surprised the number of people that are actors and people who are around without masks, as they have to be when they're doing something, and a crew of 100, 125 people that didn't know that they qualified for the booster. So can you just go?
Yeah, you spoke to that woman, remember?
I spoke to several people. I don't want to name names. Some of them were actors who,
like in a restaurant.
And that's right. And I met someone in a restaurant too who did not know. So can you explain that?
I think I think this has been not well communicated. You know, we know that the groups that were specifically added, people who were vulnerable,
right?
People were 65 and above, people who worked as first responders, health professionals. But I think this whole question of what about everybody else has been left sort of, well, we don't have the official FDA, CDC approval yet of it. I hear that in the next week we may get it for Pfizer. Pfizer has asked for approval for the booster, so for a wider approval for the booster. So I think it is confusing for people, and this is a time when I know we always say that, the check with your clinician, but to me, I would like anybody who is eligible to get that booster to get it, because I think the protection goes up geometrically. If there is a specific reason why you should not, that you're going to talk to your doctor about, that's fine. But I think everybody should go by the assumption, the supposition that let's see if I'm eligible, right, and then go out there and get it. It's up on the CDC website. There's a lot of reason, and the data from Israel, is very compelling, showing that risk for hospitalization, the risk went down tenfold after the boosters started on July 30th. And it happens pretty quickly. The antibodies go up at a week, but they really are up at a month. And then you're pretty protected. Now, the question is, when can you go back to doing what we all want to do? And I think that's where the tightrope comes in right now, because we're a heterogeneous population. There are pockets of the country that are hotter than others. New York City has a little bit of an uptick. Did you see it went from 750 or so up to 1,000 cases a day, although hospitalizations are down, which is good. We're going to be indoors again, in the cold. Yeah. You can't be outside all the time. So I think everybody's going to have to make their own decisions. For me, in my life, I have been using the rapid test a lot. I have said for my family, now that all four of us are boosted plus a month, that, it used to be that I had my sons come in, we would all test, and then we would be together. I think now, you make this, everybody make their own personal decision. But for me, I think I'm okay with them just coming in, and we're as protected as we can be.
Right. But to your point, a minute or so ago, Jon, Zach says, I called the doctor's office to see when I could get my booster, and they scheduled me the next day. Right. Just to prove your point there.
I think people have to be aggressive here, because it is logistically, doctors like me are in a weird position right now where the FDA and the CDC are saying, well, it's not official yet.
Right.
But then when people call me, I give them this same honest spiel. So I would call your doctor. They're not going to call you probably, because there's so many people to contact, and it's very hard to write, even in a mass email, exactly the logic. It's a discussion.
Right.
So I'm putting in a lot of time, a lot of hours talking to people one by one. I'm happy to do it because it's a confusing time. So I think people need to do that.
Okay. Well, I know there are a lot of viewer questions for you for next Monday. Can't wait for our whole show to be dedicated. It's perfect timing right before the holidays.
Great. And can I ask a favor for all you people out there in stars in the house land? We launched our Instagram, the NYU Empathy Project. We finally launched an Instagram account.
Yes.
It's got like 25 followers right now. We have a little bit more on the Twitter, although a Twitter account, not more. It's the same handle at NYU Empathy. Could people today go there and follow us? I would so appreciate it. And then I would think of the cozy followers that we would have. This would be all of our community.
I just clicked follow, although it didn't say follow back. Rude. So I guess.
All right, well, I'll have to do that. Anyway, this is the time. The punchline of this all is multiple layers of protection. You know about what they all are: vaccination, including booster, ventilation, filtration, masks, testing, and everybody's going to, have to really have those multiple layers and then make their individual risk tolerance, because everybody's risk tolerance is different. So I can't tell you what to do. And if there's somebody out there who wants to be 100% safe, then they're not going to have their sons and their kids who are out in the world who have a booster and you have a booster. Maybe they don't feel comfortable having them come in. And in that case, go ahead and test them. And then they walk through the door.
Right.
So everybody has to do what they have to do.
Okay. All right. We will see you with that show. All right.
See you.
Bye. Okay, Blake, let's bring back Blake Ross. Okay, Blake, so everyone's here. So do you want to just you want to introduce everyone and we'll bring it up?
Yes. So we'll take a pause from the drama a bit.
Okay.
Again, it's very dramatic and the whole story can't be told here. But I did want to bring on the players that were to come to Broadway, because there was a whole show that we never got to see. And I wanted to take a little bit of the show that was and get a little bit of an idea of what we could have seen had this whole debacle not happened. So we're bringing on Karen Mason, the great Karen Mason, who is playing Miss Danvers.
Here she
is.
Hello.
Hi,
Karen.
Hey. Good to see you
Karen.
all.
Hi,
We're
Mrs.
bringing
Danvers.
in her co-star, Ryan Silverman, who is playing the dashing Maxim De Winters.
Hello.
Hi, Ryan.
Hey, Ryan.
And we're bringing on another player who was very integral to this happening, but rarely does interviews because he's not the front of house. He's back, the production stage manager who's worked on 1 bajillion manillion shows, Tripp Phillips.
Hi, Tripp.
Hi.
Hey, Tripp.
Hey, Karen. How's everybody? Nice to be here.
Good.
Hi, Tripp.
So-
Tripp was my stage manager in the Ritz.
Yes.
Tripp, I think Tripp was everybody's stage manager everywhere, because Tripp, how many shows have you worked on Broadway?
Well, when we stopped for the pandemic in March of last year, we were a day short of our first preview of Plaza Suite, which would have been Broadway show number 20 for me.
Wow.
Not counting some tours and I think 12 encores and a lot of other stuff, but that would have been number 20. Plaza Suite would have been.
That's a
Or
lot,
the
though.
shows that could have been like Rebecca.
Yeah, that's right.
So I just want everybody to appreciate what the show was supposed to be. Karen, can you explain a little bit about Miss Danvers, this amazing character that so rarely comes along for women on Broadway? Can you tell us a little bit about who you were going to play as Miss Danvers?
Well, the really lovely thing about Mrs. Danvers is she would have been a woman of a certain age, which, she could have been of a certain age, but certainly older than most women get to play on Broadway. She is a fascinating woman because she was very much in love with Rebecca, very much. She loved every aspect of Rebecca, and when Rebecca died, she did not make it very comfortable for Max's new wife coming into the picture. And, she's like this very controlling, dark, wonderful, gets to sing over-the-top songs that I was really looking forward to playing.
I know. James, can you play a little bit of that clip of Rebecca? It's not of Karen, it's from the German production, but it shows it gives a little taste about what these songs were.
Okay.
Wow. Well, that would have been fun. 8 times a week. Come on.
So, Ryan, how did you, because there had been different iterations of Maxim, and you were to be the guy who played it on Broadway after Tam had left. Can you give a little bit of when you came in? Did you do the reading? Did you do any readings of it? You didn't.
I didn't do any of the readings. I don't know how many there were or what, but I came in. Relatively, I don't want to say last minute, but the turnaround from me being hired to fired was really quickly. It all happened very.
You
very
did not
fast.
get fired.
The show got fired.
The show got
The
fired.
show got fired.
So yeah, I think I was perhaps one of the last two to be hired for the show.
Ryan,
Didn't you and Jill come in at the same time? I'm sorry,
Yes,
Seth.
yeah.
Oh,
She
yeah.
and I she and I auditioned together. One of the rare moments we actually auditioned
Wow.
with the. I think she was in the running before I was, so she was in the callback, and we did all our scenes together and all that stuff.
So I should say we're talking about Jill Pace.
Jill Pace,
Who
yes.
then went on after Sierra had departed the show. Jill Pace was supposed to play I, and the one who falls in love with Ryan's character Maxim. Can we play a little bit of the clip? Because you have to understand, everybody. Karen, Ryan, Jill, they were all doing promotional work for the show. They were preparing themselves for the show, reading scripts. Tripp, which we'll talk to in a minute, was doing an enormous amount of work. So there was a lot of work that was going on. They were very close to starting rehearsals, like maybe 24 hours. Can you play a little bit of the Ryan clip with Jill? Do you have it?
Is it the Bryant Park performance?
Yes, the Bryant Park, the Broadway and Bryant Park.
So this was like a promo for Rebecca. You guys were outdoors.
Yes.
Ryan,
Again, it was not me. I was out of town
I
working.
forgot that we did that. Yeah, we had the Rebecca shirts on and everything.
Ryan, how close was this to when rehearsals were supposed to begin?
I think it was soon. It was in the week
It was
or
like
something.
2
It was
weeks
like,
before.
yeah, it was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, 2 weeks to D-Day. Here we go.
Help me face the night, give me the right to escape from yesterday. Lost in my world, can you find me a future? Lead me from confusion to something true. Show me what love can
Yes, on the spin.
I totally forgot we did that.
And we'll talk a little bit about it, but when Sierra did the reading in London, that was problematic, and they changed people midway, and they had that weird, bizarre thing in London. Christopher Hampton, who's a brilliant Oscar-winning writer, was brought in to help with the book, and you're literally translating it from German to English. It was not a great show, but when you brought in somebody to actually write the book and rewrite some of the lyrics in English, as it became something completely different. Am I right?
Are you asking anyone in particular?
Asking. Yeah. Whomever, Karen, you tell me. Am I right? I mean, what did you feel about this when you?
I'm not sure I ever saw a script.
No, I did, and I
Really?
worked on a lot of editing the script because we used to go down to Graciella's and Jules's townhouse and have meetings in the mornings. Michael Blakemore and Graciella and myself and a couple of the associates, and we would go page by page through the script and talk about the staging and the transitions and all that stuff that you do before you start production. And yeah, I mean, I know the script had a lot of work done on it. I mean, the reality is that it's that style of sort of European pop opera, which is what it is.
Yeah.
Is very dissimilar to what we're used to seeing on Broadway. And I think there was a stiltedness, if I might say that, in some of the writing that Michael and the team were trying to get out of the working draft so that it was a little bit more playable for the actors and a little less And now we've adapted this from a book into German into English, that sort of thing. I don't know. It would have been interesting to actually see it rehearsed in the room with on its feet and see how it actually played, because that's when you really learn a lot. But
So, Tripp, when we auditioned, was the script that they used for the auditions, was that the old translation, or was that?
How far before the first rehearsals were supposed to be? I think February of 12, right? And how?
I auditioned. I was in Chicago doing A Christmas Story, so it would have been in 2011, late 2011.
I was in Chicago doing A Christmas Story. You remember that? When I came to New York to have an interview with Michael Blakemore for Rebecca, actually.
Oh my God, that's right.
Yeah, we were actually doing that together, and I got a call. We were in the studio there in Chicago, and
old age.
Yeah, and John Rando very kindly let me out, and I flew in for a day to meet Michael Blakemore, and that, for me personally, that was the main reason I wanted to do that. By the show, by chance, I had just done Before Christmas Story. I'd done 2 straight plays on Broadway, I think Lombardi and Born Yesterday, and I wanted to do another musical. And I thought, well, this will be a big technical thing.
Yeah,
with all this moving pieces and parts and the pyro and all that stuff. Plus, I've seen Michael Blakemore stuff since going back to the 80s with Lettuce and Lovage and his great City of Angels, his great Kiss Me Kate. I mean, he's the real thing. And so luckily, when I came in to meet him, we hit it off right away. And I knew Graciela from Pal Joy, and she is nothing but pure joy. And so a lot of the people who were in the team, for me, that was and the fact that it was going to be a big production was sort of the draw for me.
I didn't know Graciela was going to choreograph it.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah.
Certainly.
Oh my God!
The pedigree for this show was amazing.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And the first time that it was, there's a whole saga, but the first time it was postponed, I was supervising a lab of what was then called Becoming Chaplin, and became just Chaplin.
Right.
Warren Carlyle's production with Rob McClure, and we got a notice about, I don't know, it was close to 2 weeks before the first rehearsal. It wasn't like the second one was. The second postponement was literally on a Friday before Monday morning, but that one was like 2 weeks before. But because Michael was in town and because there were plans for it to go forward, we had these wonderful meetings at Graciela's place and sat at her kitchen table downtown, and just Maddie, her associate, was there, and I think Kevin Seitz was there, and we just talked through scenically and all those things, and also dramaturgically what was going to happen. And the entire physical production was basically done sitting in warehouses, and we had done a great deal of pre-production work as well before the first postponement in air quotes. And then the second time it came, literally, it was a Friday afternoon at 5:00. We had been in New 42 all that week. We had taped out the floor. We had all the rehearsal scenery. We had all the binders. We had all, there's a huge amount of work that we do before the first rehearsal. And I had myself and 2 other stage managers and 3 production assistants. So there were 6 of us working all that week. And we had everything done. In fact, my assistant Diane took this beautiful picture of this floor that we had taped in New 42 with 18 colors of spike tape, indicating all the scenes and sets and all the moving pieces and parts. And I was here at home. It was about 5:00 on a Friday, and one of the PAs was here helping me. We were literally doing some last-minute, tiny, fussy stuff when I guess it was Marshall Purdy who called me and said it was being postponed again. And I really just wanted to sit down and cry because, frankly, I had turned down 2 other shows to do it, and it was very, very difficult. And, of course, that one came in the fall, September, at a time where the shows that were going to go for that fall had already gone. They were in rehearsal or in previews or whatever. So it was to me, the second time was like, wow. And that was literally less than 48 hours before the first rehearsal was supposed to be.
Wow. Do you guys get any money when the show was postponed? Was it like, but here's 6 months of your salary or something?
No, we got 2 weeks. They got 2 weeks for us. Equity was able to get 2 weeks. And I had gotten 3 weeks of pre-production because we had been working for 3 weeks of pre-production, as well as the first time we did 3 weeks of pre-production. But that was it. Now, and it's like you can't get water from a stone or whatever. I mean, there was no money.
The money wasn't there.
The money was not there. And, the second time they had gotten as far as marquees were up at the Broadhurst. I'd been in the Broadhurst. We had located the dressing rooms. I had assigned who was going to be where and where our office was and where wardrobe was. And they had started the load-in process. And for like a week before the cancellation, and eventually I was told by people that know that Ben didn't even have the money to have that stuff taken out. So the Schuberts had to pay for that themselves because of their long-term friendship with him going back to when he ran the Promenade and the Variety Arts. But there was no money to do anything. So we were, Equity was able to get us 2 weeks. That's what I got. I assume that's what you guys got.
Because you have to have the equity bond.
Yeah.
Already
They had the bond and they
going.
cashed the bond out and paid us 2 weeks, which is what the bond does. And that was about it.
Tripp, you always, I know that day that we had the get together that Monday, and I remember you were so angry and so upset about it. And I guess I never put it together, actually. I was dealing with my own mishigas. But that, you had done so much work before, of course.
Yeah.
Oh, my God. I mean, I
worked really hard, and also I had turned down Chaplin, which Warren was then coming to Broadway to the Barrymore. And the Christmas Story that we had done the year before,
right?
A tryout in five cities that fall, was going to come into the marquee. I think it was for a holiday run, and I passed on that also because I had made a commitment to Graciela and to Michael Blakemore, and certainly I had my doubts about Ben, not from the beginning, but they certainly continued to evolve over that whole process. But I had, turned down those 2 shows plus an encore season and a whole bunch of stuff, and it's just, I was angry. I was mad as hell.
Ooh.
So I just want to, the Monday that you're referring to is, this train was ready to go, and that was going to be the first rehearsal,
right.
and like 24 to 48 hours before this whole thing went off the rails. And instead of just, everyone just ended up getting together because they had the rehearsal space and sort of having this commiseration at
our little wake.
Yeah,
it was
recall that we got that email that the show was, not happening. I feel like we got it Sunday night, didn't we?
Well, no, you didn't get an email because I know Nick Wyman, Jim Barber, and I made phone calls to each and every cast member saying, because we were there in the morning or the afternoon. Tripp, was it morning or afternoon at Ben Sprecker's?
Well, what we did was, I got the word. I was one of the first ones to get the word about 5:00 on Friday. On Sunday, we went into Ben's office, which at that time was August Wilson, a group of us, not everybody. You were there, Wyman was there,
and Jim Barber was the cast. They were the cast.
I was there. Kevin Seitz was there, and Ben was crying at the table and breaking down and all that. And we had already decided, or we decided that day, that they had paid for the rehearsal studios, and we were set up and had the room, so we would meet on Monday morning and just have sort of a moment together as a company before my team started loading everything out and tearing up the tape off the floor and doing all that stuff that you normally do after 4 or 5 weeks. That was all how that came down. But we had been in Ben's office on Sunday, and then everybody was in the studio on Monday morning, briefly to sort of have a moment together.
Yeah. Sorry, Ryan. I didn't mean to jump down your throat.
It's one of those truth is stranger than fiction things. You couldn't really make it all up.
Yeah.
And I found
Ryan,
out.
do you specifically remember anything from that meeting, that weird wake thing that you guys had?
Do.
Is there anything that stands out from that?
Well, I do remember the first thing was all the tape on the floor, and I was like, wow.
It was a beautiful floor. It was so
gorgeous.
It was.
I'm just trying to figure out what it all was going to mean, and but I do remember very much it was very solemn, and it was people had moved from the West Coast. They had moved to Jim Barber had moved his family. Everyone had given up work. I had given up a year of concerts and things, and so everybody was sort of telling their story of what they're missing out on. But mostly it was just I remember just this quietness of people just sitting and ready, waiting for somebody to say something.
It wasn't like a wake or something like you said. I mean, it was that, and we had these beautiful binders with scripts and scores and all this paperwork we had meticulously planned. And, it was all just trash eventually. And I had found out retroactively that the week before, in other words, before I got the Friday notification of the second and what ended up being the final cancellation, Marshall Purdy, the general manager, I shouldn't call him by name, but he basically stopped speaking to me and was very strange and distant. And when I asked him later, all I would get out of him was, well, we knew there was a mole and we didn't know who it was, and of course it was Thibodeau, but he stopped trusting all of us because he thought we were leaking to the press or something like that.
Oh,
I mean, that's
wow.
all, and that's all in the podcast. Like, we don't want to ruin too much because you got to hear the crazy scandals and ins and outs that Blake talks about on Burn.
So basically, after this meeting, after this wake for this funeral of Rebecca, unfortunately.
Now, Barbara Marino did make brownies.
Okay, after the brownies, so they had a bit of a shiva, whatever it was. Then Sprecher literally goes from that to the FBI, and I won't say anything more, but he goes to the FBI and they unravel what happened to the financial side of this thing. Sprecher had faults. Mark Houghton had an immense amount of fault, and you'll hear in the podcast that I talked to Mark Houghton from jail. Fascinating character. But again, serial con man, so you can't really trust what he says.
No, and you're crazy, Blake, and I think you said this, was all you had to do was do a simple Google search on Mark Houghton at the beginning, and you would have had red flags all over the place. But, the hubris was not allowing those kind of things to happen.
Yeah, so he goes to the FBI, and the big linchpin in all of this was the show's publicist, Mark Thibodeau, was involved in some way that also essentially crashed this musical. There was a bunch of car crashes that ended up becoming this musical. But I mentioned to Karen a little bit before this, do you guys think at all that this could take on like a Carrie sort of lore where people want to see it and there's some iteration of Rebecca playing somewhere? Because the story is really gaining ground with my podcast. There's a documentary on YouTube about it. Do you think that there's any chance that we could see Rebecca at all anywhere in New York or in the United States?
Well, you never know. I think it's tainted. I mean, I think the project is really tainted. And I also, I mean, for myself personally, I did it, as I said, because the people involved and because it was a big show scenically and all that stuff. I don't know how great the intrinsic material is. It's a great story, and I think a lot of the music is very good. I don't know how strong the adaptation and the lyrics, and I don't know. In my opinion, I don't think they would have stood up to New York critical standards at the end of the day. Do you guys think that's true or no?
Yeah, we both Karen and I we didn't have a whole lot of experience. Right. I think I do recall reading through the script, and I actually thought they actually did a great job. And I know I had conversations about the music. Because you mentioned it too, Tripp, that the European pop opera sensibility doesn't really play here, but they were very aware of that they were trying to pull out some of that, and certainly.
Well, they were going with a much bigger orchestral thing, weren't they, Ryan?
Yeah, that was the plan, anyways. So I was hopeful about that, but you're probably right, Tripp, in that I do think before anything went down, that people were probably ready to jump on it. That's to some degree, you know what I mean?
Absolutely.
Because it was one of those big bombastic Euro pop things, and I think the story can kind of support that because it is sort of a big story in that way, big melodramatic in the true meaning of melodrama story. But it's how the treatment was going to actually play, and I think Michael and Graciela would have made the best possible case for it because they're really smart people, both of them, smart, talented people. And that was exciting, and I think it would be fabulous to see some version to see does it have legs. But Carrie was this big thing, and then it came back in that off-Broadway revival, and nobody really cared about it. I mean, it didn't really do anything. So
well, no, actually, no, it's like produced all over the world now.
It is, but I'm saying here in New York, it did. I mean, it ran for a limited run, and then that was it. So it was.
People were fascinated by. I don't know. I'm not a Broadway producer, mostly because of all the craziness that goes around making a Broadway musical. You need to know exactly what you're doing. This is a cautionary tale, if nothing else.
For sure.
That you can't take. I mean, this is a $14 million endeavor, a community that you are running that imploded and hurt a lot of people. But it's taken on, the story itself has taken on a life of its own. I mean, I don't remember the last time a mega musical was besieged by con men, insider dealings, deaths, destruction.
Right.
That it's sort of, I took a it's stuck in my craw. So I would pay to see it.
I mean,
but
I think they should actually make a musical about that.
Yes.
Let's
Yes,
shuffle
right.
Maybe
along.
less. It would be a lower budget.
Except
Okay,
truth
you
is
have to
stranger
have
than
a
fiction.
staircase
You know,
still.
yeah. Well, I will say this
So
story. And can you bring? Is Philip still on?
Yes, he's right here.
Bring Philip on again, just so we can close out. Sorry, Philip. I know we were keeping you waiting for a while, but I keep hearing things about the story of Rebecca, not the musical, but the story of Rebecca putting on the musical to this day that I'm like, what? Like just today, Betty Buckley tweeted at me saying, I have my own Rebecca musical story for another time. Of course, I called her. She is filming a movie and she said, I'll take you to lunch and I'll tell you about it. But I keep hearing things. The lead producer, Ben Sprecher, ends up having his own criminal issues that ends up happening.
Related.
Not even related, but it was related in his sentencing that happened. He had some criminal stuff happen in his sentencing. In the sentencing, the judge mentioned the hardship that that befell him because of the crash of this musical. It was one of the reasonings behind his light sentence. So again, listen to the podcast if you want to hear about that craziness. But I hear things about this musical still to this day, which are like craziness, like out of the woodworks. Philip,
We want another episode of Burnt.
You might get it.
Yeah.
Phil, didn't you hear something that you wanted? Didn't you hear something today when I spoke to you and you were like, I have something else that I just heard? No.
Well, yeah. I mean, in terms of his other problems, you know, he pled guilty to possession of child pornography and he got 5 years of probation. And it was this crazy filing where he was asking the court for permission to carry an iPhone, that he was only entitled to either a computer or an iPhone and not both. And, just speaks to the, the indignity of being a registered sex offender. And he was turned down for being able to carry around an iPhone. He just has to carry a flip phone.
I mean, he's sort of a tragic figure in a way. And I have to say, I think I talked to a couple of high-level Broadway people about him, and he was very friendly, very close with the Schuberts for a number of years. But at the end of the day, and this is what several people have said to me who are very highly placed, there are probably 15 people in New York who are really first-rate lead producers who know how to get Broadway musicals on, who know how you have to do it, and Ben did not know. And his Schuberts did not allow him to get the right help and to say, I don't know what I'm doing here. And at the end of the day, it makes him a very tragic figure with lots of demons, obviously, but also a lot of hubris that ultimately is what sank the show.
And I will say the last thing I found out recently was that now he's in a lawsuit with his former business partner. He owned a string of theaters. He's now suing his former business partner that he hasn't done business with for like a decade. For things from the Promenade Theater, which was long ago. So
yeah, that and the Variety Arts were his thing. Yeah,
and this is a business partner who testified on Ben's behalf in this trial that I covered.
So there's lots of twists and turns, and things keep popping up every day for the story that is like 10 years old.
Wow,
so
someone's going to be doing an extra episode for sure. You're going to have an epilogue. Blake, before we go, can you read the?
We have one really fun donation just to read.
Oh yes. This donation is $50 from Jill. She says, hi, Seth and James. Many thanks for another amazing show. Special shout out to me, Blake, and the Rebecca team for an amazing podcast and show. Best, Jill, regretfully former Rebecca / Sprecher assistant.
Wow.
Scandal. Thank you, Jill.
Thanks,
and
Jill.
Oh, nice.
Karen Mason, this is for you. This is the real Mrs. Danvers from the movie. And
I can look like that.
Right? My friend Jeffrey Roberson, whose character name is Varla Jean Merman, has a dog whose name is Mrs. Danvers. We call her Mrs. D because she looks so much like Mrs. Danvers.
Great.
That's literally Mrs. Danvers, the dog.
Wait, before we go, can we end on a positive note? Because we like to do that here on Stars in the House.
Sure, Blake.
Tomorrow, the legendary Karen Mason... You have a show tomorrow, don't you?
I do. And after hearing the doctor talk, I'm feeling concerned. I have a show tomorrow night at Feinstein's at 54 Below.
And it's not
Yes,
just
Karen.
any show.
It's
Miss
my
Mason.
birthday. Well,
it's a birthday show.
It's my birthday from a year and a half ago. So I'm much older and not even wiser. So, but
By the way, Karen, if you're concerned about that kind of stuff, because I have a show running too. Basically, whenever you do a show, what I've learned from Dr. LaPook, ask them about the ventilation, ask them about the MERV 13 filters, and ask the audience to be masked. And that's what I do my off-Broadway show.
I'm definitely, I know that 54 Below said that they're not, like, because there's eating but I think that's probably going to be part of my patter is just, I would really love it if I don't want anybody to get sick. I don't want anything. Just please wear your masks. Eat afterwards.
There you go.
I love it, Karen Mason.
You got it.
But
that
happy
happened.
birthday, Karen.
Well, thank you. It was, it's actually in March, but
It's fine. It's fine.
It's fine. Sell
it's
those
never
tickets,
too
Bob.
early to celebrate.
Exactly.
All right. Well, thank you, everyone. Thank you, Blake, for putting this all together. We've got a reunion of a show happening that we thought maybe was going to happen tomorrow, but it's because of the filming schedule. Now that things are not all shut down, as Karen Mason has said, she has her show tomorrow, and Seth's got his show. It's going to basically, this is a reason why people need to subscribe, if you don't already, to Stars in the House YouTube channel, because we will not be doing a show tomorrow, but I think our next show is going to be like at an oddball time in order to accommodate this reunion for the West Coast.
Yeah.
What?
It's a really good one.
Yeah, it's a really good one.
Yes.
All right,
That's
so
it, right,
let's
Seth?
say goodbye
So
to everybody.
Stay tuned. Subscribe and check our social media for when our show will be. Our second show this
Oh,
week.
I should show my Jack
will be-
video before everybody goes. Well, I'll say goodbye to everybody. So let
All
me
right,
first say
say
goodbye to
goodbye
everybody.
to
So
them,
keep
okay.
you here stunned.
All right,
Thank
Trip.
you, Trip.
Thank you guys for
Trip.
indulging
Nice to see you
us.
guys.
Thank you
in this
all.
walk down memory lane.
So great
Trip.
seeing you.
Walk down memory lane.
Bye, Ryan. Bye, Philip.
Blake can watch. Blake can stay on first.
All right, I don't want to harass people. Bye,
Blake's
Kat.
not going to mind.
All right, this is my friend Jack put together. Blake you saw my first performance
on
of
September
Seth's
12th.
Broadway Breakdown.
So when we were in LA, Blake, Jack put together this great video promo of it.
This is
really
Jack,
good.
Jack
It's
Plotter's
so
work
good.
because my show just got extended. So this is the little promo that Jack put together.
Isn't that great?
It's so good. Jack is really good.
I
He
know.
is really, really good. But I will say, I'm sure every single person who's watching this, if you're still watching, you probably have seen Seth's show. But if you're lagging, you really should get tickets. It is so funny. It's all Seth in this. And Asylum is a really cool theater. I love Asylum. It's in Chelsea. It's like a small, intimate house. You feel really, but not small enough where you feel like claustrophobic. Everyone's masked, but it's such a good show, Seth. It really is.
Thank you, Blake. So is Burnt. Right back at you.
Thanks.
Um,
But definitely buy your tickets for Asylum, Seth's show at Asylum, Karen Mason's show tomorrow at
There you go.
54 Below, and also that ACLU show on Monday.
Oh, and Seth, your concert series
and
on
yes.
Sunday with Andrea Burns.
Oh my God, that of course Sunday live, 8 p.m. Eastern.
That's right. All right.
We've got lots
and
of
stay tuned.
entertainment coming up for you guys.
That's right. All right,
That's
Seth, what are you going to play? Do you know anything from Rebecca that you can play? Can you?
Should I
in the end
sing?
credits? Oh, it's going to be Phantom, of course.
No, Phantom. But play Phantom. That's better.
Basically,
there
this
you
is what
go.
they wanted it to be.
That is what they wanted it to be. Yes. In their dreams, this is what would have been played.
In sleep, he sang to I. Anybody?
No.
Thank you. I had to try
Oh
to
my
make it work.
gosh.
All right. In honor of Karen Mason.
There you go.
With one look, I'll be I.
That's right.
We gotta go our sponsors. Hold on, who are our sponsors?
Yes.
It's brought to you by. Thank you, Staging Concepts. Thank you, StreamYard. Bye.